real great advertising, real great storytelling always have humor in it, always have emotions, always have humor. That's the one thing I think banking is missing. People are afraid that you can't laugh about. I'm not laughing about money. I'm making sure you have a warm moment looking at what we communicate.
Johan Jervøe is one of the greatest CMOs ever to work in finance. Over 10 years, he turned the $3 trillion asset manager UBS into one of the world's most iconic brands. And before that, he was behind some of the most recognizable campaigns in modern culture. Not only did he bring the I'm Lovin' It campaign to McDonald's, but also Intel's unique collaboration with will.i.am. In this episode, we dig into quite simply what makes a great CMO. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Johan. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here in person. I just want to get stuck in. And my first question always with CMOs is, what do you think the difference is between a good CMO and an exceptional CMO?
God, who am I to judge that? Look, it's a combination of a couple of things. I think curiosity is probably a character you need to have in this job. You have to have a certain amount of understanding of your audience, so real insights-driven work that is translated into something that is entertaining. Entertaining, maybe not in a stand-up comedian way, but entertaining as stopping power creative, stopping power information, stopping power white paper, whatever it might be, because the world is full of advertising and offers and solutions that we all don't need. And as we are sort of in a financial industry kind of setup, banking in general is like your water at home. You don't really think a lot about it until you need it. Therefore you really need to stand up. Also, when you look at now my role at UBS, it was a group-wide CMO role. So we had a wealth manager, a universal retail Swiss bank, an asset manager, and an investment bank. And so you clearly have, and particularly in some of the lines of business, you don't change often banks, right? You're with the bank that you started with maybe before you were a student or as a student. If you own a business, that might be the same bank you use for your business. And
10, 20, 30 years.
And then you all of a sudden you might have a moment where you're surprised about your wealth, and then you talk to the same bank about wealth management or private banking. So in that case of cutting in a relationship, and if you are a wealth manager like UBS outside of Switzerland, you really don't talk to people before they're wealthy or on their way to be wealthy, Henrys, right? So, and that is sort of well into your 30s, 40s, 50s maybe. And that means you've had a retail bank locally for 20, 30, 40, 50 years until wealth management becomes a theme. And how do you cut through that? And so it's that combination of understanding your target, be able to translate what's important, and then translate that into executions that is stopping power that will make people think, interesting, maybe I should talk to them about my finances.
So it's customer insight and the ability to cut through are the things that differentiate exceptional from good CMOs?
Yeah, because it's like anything. What makes a cook a better cook and get a 3-star Michelin? There's only 100 of those, and what will make you get one and it's not the same that to get two? And that's execution very often. 100% idea, 80% executed will never taste good. 80% idea, 100% executed will taste better. So how do you get to understand first your target, then work with the best? I mean, if you look at some of the people I work with over the years, both as a part of the employee base, but also the affiliated agency partners, some of the best in the world. And they will drive each other, similar to athletes, to be that bit better. That's what you do.
And what do you think the role is of the CMO? What's your job when you go to work every day?
Bring that client, consumer, guest insight into the building, and then put a clear perspective in what is good enough, what goes on air. Look, the world has turned significantly upside down by a couple of things. Number one, social media have us now to post 1,000 times a day across the globe, right? And I had what was called high visibility sign off. I have it today in my job as well with one of my colleagues. Anything and everything that goes on air, we'll have a look at. One little wrong social post can create a disaster. When I started out in this job 30 plus years ago, mid-90s, there was a big campaign. You had a couple of print ads, a billboard, a TV, a bit of radio. Then the internet happened. That's how old I am. 95, I was already in the job. And what would most of us do? We put the TV campaign on the internet. That was the idea behind the internet in the beginning. And then the world changed, by the way, creatively in my world with BMW Films.com. I don't know if you still remember. Guy Ritchie was the...
Yes.
And it was a series of 6 or 7 long format. I was on it at the time.
That was before he was directing films.
Yeah, and Madonna and him...
Hit it off.
Hit it off, and she's in the M5 execution.
Wow.
So that changed in my world. That is, one of the things I think you have to acknowledge as a chief marketing officer is you're not creative. I'm not a creative guy. Mm-hmm. I'm very good at taking decisions on creative, and I'm very good at pushing my creative, but I can't come up with the idea. I would never come up with BMWfilms.com, but it was genius.
So of those areas, so we mentioned customer insight, ability to cut through, also working with amazing people. I want to start with...
I want to say it all starts with one thing, working with amazing people.
All starts with working with amazing people.
It is.
That's hard to do.
Yes and no. You will never get fired because you hire somebody better than you. And with that attitude, you should have the best you can get on your team and have the best on agency partners. And, and you get the agency you deserve. You get the team you deserve. That's what you paid for.
We'll come back to that on how you attract incredible people around you. But on this point that I want to drill into first is the customer insight. Because customer insight is the basis for all marketers and all marketing campaigns. And I read the other day that when you were building UBS's platform, you interviewed over 7,000 customers to sort of land on that insight. And that struck me just as like the level of detail you go to as a CMO to really understand the customer. But what I'd love you to walk us through is like, how do you do that customer insight piece well? And what were some of the outcomes of that research that you took back then?
So just maybe take a more recent. I work for the Bista Collection, as you know. Mm-hmm. We own the Bista Village. We've owned the Bista Village. The Bista Collection has gone through, with a couple of agency partners and McKinsey, gone through 8,500 or so interviews of our guests, of how they see the village different, how they experience that from a department store, from a flagship retail brand, from a outlet, any of these things, in order to tickle out what makes us different. You could argue shopping is shopping is shopping, but it's not. And in a very similar way, you do that for a bank too. You go through thousands of, obviously you don't go through every single interview. You have somebody doing that. What you're trying to get to is what is the essence of this. And then I think, if there's anybody creative on the blog, they will appreciate this. Research is not going to tell you what to do. Research is going to tell you how to think about what to do. Many companies that gets this wrong will look at a research to find the answer. Is it A or is it B? And that is never the answer. The only place where probably research helps you figure out this is A or B is sort of the UA, so user and attitude studies, where you give somebody an app and say, what do you think about it? Yeah. What's working for you, what's not? Those UA studies will give you a little bit of insight to where to put the button on a mobile phone. But it's really understanding what are you using, what are you looking for, what is making a difference. In banking, that's tough.
So you're looking for what is different about your brand versus other brands?
Yes, you're looking specifically for what kind of experience would you want, whether that's a financial service experience or shopping, or in my old days, working for McDonald's or Milka food. One of the things that helped us understand what McCafe could be for McDonald's. Give away also a major failure. A very, very dear colleague of mine who's unfortunately dead, Martin Knoll, Martin was running McDonald's Austria, and I was in a central team, and we had worked together before. Martin was actually my first boss at McDonald's. When we started building out the McCafe, late 90s in Vienna, we obviously knew it better than anybody else, as you can imagine, so we got it wrong. We started offering up coffee specialities that would be normal in Vienna, which nobody would go to McDonald's for. And so it flopped. And it's only when we learned that it was different from what you would expect it to be, it started working, and we rolled that out throughout Europe. And it was very specifically for one reason. There was a trend early 2000-ish, 00 years, where coffee and specialities became increasingly important as a part of a statement of who you are, and particularly young females. And because we had a drip coffee that was good but not great at McDonald's at the time, we'll start losing young females. When I say young females, anything from 16 to 36 upwards. And when you lose the females, you lose the guys. It's very simple. And so McCafe was an answer to coffee culture that was becoming big. And it needs to be different and look different from the regular McDonald's. And that was the whole insights. And then you learn on top of that very often people go for a cup of coffee because they want to have a me moment. And that requires a different atmosphere and setting.
One of the ways that I've seen you bring these insights to life is through using a very prominent figure. One that sticks out in my mind was the Annie Leibovitz campaign that you did with UBS. But I wonder if, I've seen you do this again with Lewis Hamilton, with will.i.am at Intel, probably most famously Justin Timberlake at McDonald's. But I wonder if you can paint us a bit of a picture of like how you take that insight, turn it into a campaign, and then bring that to life so it resonates and cuts through.
Well, we did Heidi Klum as well for McDonald's and French fries, just to put that in perspective. We did Michael Ballack in 2006, leading up to the European Championships. Look, I think you take a celebrity, let's just call out what they're there for, right? They're multiplier. They are attention gatherer and multiplier. Different from today's social media influencer. That's all important, but the world has changed. You do that because if in essence the authenticity of that person and your brand and what you're trying to communicate in the end of the day makes sense, you get that stopping power. So it's not just getting somebody famous onto the business. It is understanding what are they communicating on behalf of the brand, and is that authentic? So with Annie, for example, there was a major push within the bank to be a real alternative to female careers in banking, and not only for employee and new employees, but also fun fact, when you look at financial matters, in particular in sort of a more traditional couple situation, married couple, very often the woman is very engaged in the day-to-day finance, paying bills, making sure all of these things. The long-term strategy about wealth management, she's very often not involved with, and it's left for the husband. And then that works really against you when you're a woman, because he will probably die earlier if you just look at statistics. And then you end up being 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever, when he is dying, not knowing where your money are and how to deal with it. So there was a major push for educating our client base female client base about how to get involved. And I'm sure you can still find some of the white papers we have.
Well, that was right at the start, because one thing I've noticed is great marketing campaigns tap into the zeitgeist sort of culture.
Correct.
And now every bank has a diversity program.
Correct.
But at that time, it was just the beginnings of...
That's why I went on tour with her with women. She, when we sat down with her and she understood who's the client base, she said, oh, they're all very achieved. So we commissioned a series of pictures with achieved women, and she would go on tour, stop in 10 markets, be 4 weeks on ground. She would be there the first week for press, clients, internal, and then the tour would open up for free for the public to go in and enjoy her pictures. And we did that in 10 markets, and that was to the theme of women because of that diversity. It came with something in addition to, which is my favorite explanation when people sort of say, oh, diversity, is that good? Look, UBS's analytics wealth management team looked at on boards, executive and non-executive, the more diverse the team is, the better results they get, not only for their share price, but also obviously for top and bottom line. And it's because you have a more diverse perspective of who you're engaging with. And that leads to more diverse objectives and therefore strategies, and you're better serving a diverse marketplace. And people nod to that because research everything academia, anything research will just reinforce that. And then my answer to when people say, so how do you think that's going? It's like, well, at the time, I don't know how it is anymore. I haven't looked at it. At the time, there was more people, CEOs in Germany at the DAX, called Peter is the first name, than women. 2 versus 1, which just in that very moment is a very humoristic way of saying, that feels awkward, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I think you do when you get this right, is making it such an obvious comment that your next thought is, there should probably be a bank for me.
And part of that whole activation was around understanding that it's not about talking about yourself as a product and a brand.
It's never talking about yourself as a product.
It's about talking about the customer.
Yes, and what you can do with it. Right? I mean, most of us are thinking about product, services, and we are an inside out. I'm offering you up what I can do. This is not what works well. What works well is explaining to you what you're looking for and getting that motivation for you to solve for that. Look at the campaign Apple does with making sure that you see people behind an Apple computer, and you look at those often celebrities that are well standing out, and you think to yourself, wow, if they use an Apple, I should. Right? It's saying something about me, and the way you translate that is in the customer's language, in their tone of voice, is when this works the best. Look at the questions campaign, right? It's your questions, it's not my question. It's, am I a good father? Which is a translation of, have I been too often in the office? Can we go abroad? And so having some of that feels like you're touching a real insight and something that makes you emotionally connect is the important part.
Well, that specific line there, that am I a good father? I was looking at it again a couple of weeks ago, and it captures so strongly what that sense of being successful and committing yourself to your job, that resonates so strongly with that whole mindset. How does it then translate into business value? This could be true across any brand, but just attaching your brand to that emotional response, how do you then connect the dots for the rest of the business?
I think very often, if you're not product advertising, but you're really brand advertising, that doesn't mean there can't be a product sort of involved in this. What the best answer when we went and interviewed just before going live with the campaign, we wanted to sort of understand how does this emotionally connect. And I remember sitting in London and talking to a very successful CEO who flipped through some of these. Is 40 New 60 was another one he liked. And it's because, I'm mid-50s. I'm getting to start thinking about, oh God, I hope that 40 is the next 60. He then looked at me and said, I've thought so often about this question at night, late in the train going home. A bank that is willing to ask those questions is a bank for me. Because I know I've missed the family. I've missed a lot of the upbringing. And now I'm thinking, how can I make sure when I'm not here one day that some of the reason why I missed it, being successful and having earned my money, that they get to enjoy that when I'm no longer around. So I think some of those things does that.
What I'm also hearing that's interesting as a marketer in there is we've spoken about insight. We've spoken about turning that into some kind of platform that resonates. But you're also testing before you put any messages out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that well?
I think it's a combination of quantitative sitting down listening.
But when do you know to listen and when do you know to follow your instinct? Because you're a marketer, you have to back yourself.
So after 30 odd years and many awards, you get a good feeling for, is this good enough? And then you're really going out to see what I call disaster check. I don't need to look at creative and get somebody else to applaud. I can see it's good. I'm good at that. What you're trying to get to is, what am I missing? That disaster check has one purpose only, is to filter out anything that you would look at with your different, upbringing, culture, society surrounding, and then go, oh, well, you can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
But go back. I mean, my son stumbled upon, James Bond, and it was Moonraker. Be not that relevant for this, but I'll give you.
Yeah.
You will see in a moment where I'm going.
Yes.
I said to Jesper, Jesper, you cannot see James Bond without me. We're going to start at Dr. No, the first one. I'm going to run through them all. And we're going to sit together, and there'll be small scenes that I don't think you should be seeing. And so we can fast forward. And it took us a couple of years. And the interesting part, when you do that, everybody should, go back to the very first one and then run through them all. Number one, there's a very clear culture connection back to society at the time. But how often I had to say to Jesper, no, when a woman says no, you can't throw her on a bed and still kiss her. And at the time was completely normal.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not anymore. That cultural lens is what a disaster check does.
Yes.
And I'm Danish. I've lived most of my life. I've lived 40 years outside Denmark, meanwhile. I still don't get everything an American, an English, a Chinese, a Japanese, a French, Italian will get. My cultural lens is obviously rich, but won't be able to, go back to times that we all might not remember.
So you have the insight, you have the campaign, you've done your sort of culture check. I guess my question is...
So I had another so for Intel, we built a campaign for Toshiba.
Okay.
And it was over 3 or 4 years where we changed the creative. First a drama, then it became something else. And the last piece we won in Cannes at the Advertising Awards, we won 3 Grand Prix and 11 Lions for it. And the idea was the beauty is inside, right? It was all about inside, Intel inside, right? The beauty is inside. So you open up on a scene in which a slightly choppy, young, mid-20, early 30-year-old guy is trying to get into a pair of way too tight khakis and a way too tight polo shirt. As he's sneaking out of the bedroom, clearly met somebody the night before, you get to understand the story that he changes. He tells you, I'm changing how I look every single day. My personality stays the same, my character stays the same, but I'm changing how I look. You follow him through being an old man, a Japanese one. You can see it all, and what it ends up being is he runs into a girl that he falls in love with, and she works somewhere, and he will show up every day And she realizes on stage that the character and the person in this changing outfit and changing person, color, sex, age, all of the above, that person is actually one and the same. And they end up falling in love, and she, by loving him, that illness of changing your outside look every day stops. But that's sold, look for the inside in a very creative way. And I think that's what you paid for. I knew when I saw the conceptual idea, that's sensational. I didn't know if the sequences of all these small vignettes, if there would be something in there where people go, oh my God, you can't say that. So that's your disaster check. It's not the creative concept as such. It is your execution to make sure it sits right and you're not running the risk of breaking the brand's trust.
But how do you know when it's good? Because it sounds like there's a moment where you see it before it's even been completed, that idea.
Yeah, you see it on paper normally.
You see it on paper and you go, this is good.
Yeah.
What's it? What is it that you're seeing there?
It's the same thing as if you are into food, will know this is tasting right.
Yeah.
I was in Barcelona for business, and in the hotel I was in, they had a small fusion Spanish food, and now I should give away, I love cooking. I love eating too, but I love cooking.
Too.
The chef then says to me, we have a special dessert made for a sit-down dinner, but I sat at the counter and I kept talking to the chefs the whole night. And so this was probably sort of we'll give you a dessert if you shut up. But the dessert was literally a very thick and rich, I'm saying white chocolate, it wasn't probably, and the chef will now shoot me if he heard this, with a thin green asparagus that had been steamed in a flavor that I can't put a finger on, and it had sort of green crumbles over it. Those green crumbles were dried capers. And if you think about dried capers, they're salty, that little bit of caper taste, but the whole combination was, I'm now drying capers at home. And I think they would be fantastic for a burrata. That is what you do in creative. If you've done this so long, you have a good feel for this is stand out.
So you have to develop your taste and then trust your taste.
Yeah.
So why do you think, this may be a personal opinion here, but why do you think so many marketers and so many brands are getting that wrong, especially now? You know, there's, on the one hand, I think of underinvesting in brand. The other hand, I think of over-indexing on performance marketing. I also think a lack of risk or knowledge in the real world of how to operate in the modern society with internet and digital. What do you think it is?
Look, many of us have to push out 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 posts every day. Your attitude should be, let's find that big idea and that golden asset that is the cornerstone of what you're trying to communicate. The teams then have to go and execute all those small vignettes, those thousands of screenshots, videos, whatever it could be that push out against that. We start in the wrong place today. We start thinking, oh God, I need 1,200 today. Let's just shoot. And I'm going to make this a humor point of view because it's sad enough as it is. We very often then look for somebody that looks like, oh, you look like somebody who could do social media. You're kind of the right age. Here's an iPhone, go and do.
Yeah.
Just because you're the right age and you get an iPhone doesn't mean you're good at creative.
Yeah.
So I think fundamentally we start the wrong place. Let's think about this for a moment. Artificial intelligence and advertising. Everybody right now think, if you're an advertiser, you don't even have to have an agency anymore. You can just type it in, I like a blah, 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 looking like this, right? No, lighter, darker, bright. Really? Have you seen the execution of this?
Yeah, it's very mediocre at best.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the same conversation when people started 20 years ago talking about big data. Big data this, big data that. I always said, don't care about big data. I care about behavioral data. If you can tell me how somebody is behaving, and I have that on large in understanding where to go with my campaign idea or where to go with a job offer opportunity for a team being set up to do something else, product, services, whatever it can be, that I'm interested in. AI, same thing. It's blown out of proportion. It will make everybody sitting at home, not having anything to do anymore. Most of the work is not good enough to even make it to be a scribble. And then you have the hallucinations of which you're not even sure it's true, although it looks true.
Well, I think that, my stance, having been on this journey for a while with AI, is that may wipe out the mediocre creatives among us. It may wipe out all of the operational pieces. But what that means is it creates a huge opportunity for people who are very good at what they do to bring creative that is thought-provoking and moving and at the right time, at the right place.
By the way, like any digital proposition did. Think about the 2,000 years in which every magazine in this world did a .com something, and that killed the paper. And then we had all this crap. We went from kiosk full of paper crap to the internet is full of crap to now great executional magazines, books, newspapers are back on the table. That means today there's more qualitative work on paper when it goes to magazines. There's something special about opening a great book. There's something special about, a newspaper that's well written. And I think you will see in a similar way exactly that. There's more music among us than ever before. We have more music in the pocket than we had CDs in the old days. There's more concerts today than ever before. There's more radio, podcast. It's kind of a radio, I know, insult, not meant to be. But we will keep over-consuming more and more and more. And by doing that, we self-select quality. That means there's more quality magazines and paper today. There's more quality music in your pocket today. We all have a camera. So I think that's
So your advice to anyone right now that's CMO of a brand is to focus on creating one cornerstone idea that is very well executed and then let that disperse across the organization.
Yeah.
Has there been a time in your career where you've done that as an example that we can lean on?
Every time in my career, right? Sponsors of tomorrow for Intel. I'm loving it for McDonald's. It was a fundamental key idea, and then you execute that into everything you do. But having an idea doesn't mean you can't execute it differently, right? Brand guidelines are like playing tennis. Tennis without lines make no sense. If you look at a Federer and Nadal, they play very different tennis within the same lines. That is what brand guidelines do. They open up to the better creative, open up to the better idea. If you have a big idea, you can keep executing that big idea differently. Think about Just Do It. Mid-70s, I think the campaign came up. Think about BMW's Freude am Fahren, 1972. They have executed that, Freude am Fahren meaning I really enjoy driving. The way they executed that into the i3, which was their first electrical car, was put a camera on the screen and see how people were smiling when they felt the acceleration. That is happiness driving a car. So those things that are really well understood allows you to keep developing creative that will stand up.
So when you come in as a new CMO, how do you decide whether you're going to keep the existing platform or you're going to throw it out the window? And then if you do decide to rebuild that brand, how do you get the team to buy into it?
So I think two things are important in there. I think as a CMO, you should never, ever, ever be able to touch and allow for rebranding, as in logo or any of these things. You have hundreds of years of great executions of most brands, 30, 40, 50 years. Having to change just because you're new is not a very good idea. The second thing is not everything new is great, not everything old is terrible. I think we all can think about many campaigns that are gone that we miss. Absolute Vodka. What did happen with that? I'm sure they got a new marketing director that thought, I hate the shape and the creative. Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you signed the contract, right? So I think you come in to be very clear about we will strengthen what's strong and what's not strong enough makes strength stronger. I think when you look at campaign ideas, we look very specifically, and I think one of the brands that I admire for what they've done with their logo is MasterCard. If you pull out a MasterCard, and I hope you can do it here, pull out a MasterCard old logo, 2 round rings, colored in MasterCard massively across it to be 2 small circles, empty, with MasterCard in small underneath. None of us saw it would be new. Obviously, it's very new, but still feels more of the same. It has that DNA coming with it, and then there was an answer to a time in which, cap funds means I'm yelling at you. So there was a humbleness that came with that was right for the time.
And my second point around this internal comms. So I know you're a big fan of having internal comms report into you. Okay, but a big part of the brand, especially in private banking, where your staff are your salesmen or any other, relationship.
Face of the brand.
The face of the brand.
Face of the brand. You will have heard through the financial crisis at any bank that, I don't know, I had 2 different reference points. I had the big brand name that disappointed me because of the financial crisis and whatever you were involved in. And then I had Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, who was my client advisor, who I still love. And both have the same brand name. One I love because of the connection, and one I hate because of how you stumbled. Most businesses that are people-driven, hotels, restaurants, banks, underestimate what that person can do. Look, we both committed to liking food. Walk into a restaurant where they're all foodies, and you will enjoy ordering food because you say, what about this? Yeah, but that, and you should know the flavor. And go into a normal restaurant and you say, what is great on the menu? And they say, it's all great. Okay, I know that, but anything specific? Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. And you want to have that in banking. You want to have somebody in banking being excited about what they can help you with, not what they can sell you, what they can help you with. And in order to have that right, I'm less concerned about having internal comms reporting into me. I'm more excited about having internal comms being the first stepping stone how you launch a campaign. Because your internal audience are your brand ambassadors. If you get this right, you have, depending on the brand, 90,000 people being proud of it. When we relaunch, I'm loving it. Well, actually, it was the German campaign. I lived in Germany at the time. It was called Ex-UBS, and when we introduced that to our senior management, they thought this could be a global campaign, first global campaign ever. We then started looking at what are some of the touch points in a restaurant where we could communicate more, and we had learned from a critical path incident technique where we put a camera on people's head so you can see where they look and you can see how long they look. At the time, where did people look when they walked into a McDonald's? And where they were looking in the menu board. Even if you're super fan that comes so and so often a week, you still look what's new and what we'll do today, and you might end up with 2 cheeseburgers and 6 nuggets. However, once you ordered, the person turns, in the old days, it's done differently today, but they turn around to the bin and start confectionery your order. So you're looking at the back. If you go back and look at what we did in many countries, in Germany particularly, we put I'm loving it on the back on the shirt because we knew you're going to wait 10, 15 seconds looking at that back of the cool person putting this together. So if I want to bring across as a new campaign, that's how I do it.
So most places on their internal campaign will create some kind of document, they'll create some slides, they'll run it on the screens
if you're lucky.
Over the offices.
If you're lucky.
What do you do to genuinely connect with that many people and get them bought into the campaign, get them excited?
We travel for 4 months for the Christmas campaign. Get in front of as many people as you can.
And you're showing them the creative?
Showing the creative, you're telling what's going on. Don't forget, real great advertising, real great storytelling always have humor in it. Always have emotions, always have humor. That's the one thing I think banking is missing. People are afraid that you can't laugh about money. I'm not laughing about money. I'm making sure you have a warm moment looking at what we communicate. And that will make a difference. That's why we go and see stand-up comedians. We like laughing. By the way, research will tell you any emotion, either very sad or very happy, will make your memory memorize that moment better, which is why you should build in emotions.
It makes sense, but also going back to what makes a great CMO, you know, you're building relationships there. You're investing and you're showing your staff that you care. You give a shit about them.
Yeah, and we do. And if you don't, then you're doing the wrong job. Look, when we did I'm Loving It, we had a tour throughout Germany, only because at that time I was in Germany, where all restaurant staff, all franchisees, throughout 10 of those sessions, got educated about what is going to go on air. What have we just launched? Why is that important? Well, you can obviously not do all of them prior to, so it's you do as much as you can, then you launch and you keep going. And you keep taking questions. Have people to say about, I don't really like this moment, and they can discuss it. I don't maybe want to reference politics, as you just have got a new prime minister, as we just see in France with a new election. But there's no really big difference in trying to sell your party line and what you can do for a country than what you're trying to do with a campaign idea.
Showing up in person can't be beat.
Why do you think I'm here?
You tell me.
Because it matters.
Yes.
I could have done this on a Zoom call and it would have been half the enjoyment for me
totally.
and for you.
Totally.
Show me you care. Then I'll care. It matters to me because it matters to you.
And that emanates out from them, right? Because then they have that same energy when they meet the clients, or.
And if you're in a client business and you don't care about what matters to the client, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
Hospitality is not selling, it's serving.
Well, speaking of hospitality, one of the things that you've been very successful with is events and physical locations. I wanted to kind of pick your brains and maybe talk through a couple of examples of how you do events well. So we've spoken about private banking. I know your work at Bista is very much in-person and that in-person experience. You know, how do you run a great...
By the way, 30-year-old business next year, able to resist .com, e-commerce, all of these things. We never built that up.
But that's fascinating because the high street is gone.
Everybody always said you have to do. And Scott Malkin, the founder, and the executive team around him always were, it's about experience, it's about experience, it's about experience. And that physical experience, look, reality is, as a human, we are built to read more than just what I hear, right? Because you would normally walk out of the cave in the old days and then see somebody and you have to realize, is he going to eat me or are we going to be friends? And that is everything that the body can analyze with. Mm-hmm. That is physical experience. Why do you think after COVID everybody's traveling everywhere? Because we're missing going around. And if you look into any research about longevity, you will understand that physical exercise is important, financial freedom, whatever that might be, is important. Sleep well, eat well, and social contacts. You miss the social contacts, you die early.
Community is a secret to long life, for sure. But let's take an example of the F1.
Yes.
Right? And I think we were speaking about this the other day, but, you know, there's one thing sponsoring something like the F1, and there's one thing doing that well and getting stories to cut through and also just driving return on investment. How do you get a partnership like that right? Like, why do you pick that as the partner, and then how do you get that right?
Let's take a step back and look at World Cup for a moment. Late 90s. We were a family restaurant. We wanted to offer something to the kids, so we, together with FIFA and UEFA, swapped the Flag Bearer program, of course, that was for older kids, because they were not that interested, and started creating the player escort, the kids running out with the players. And we raffled that off for the consumer. Would you not want, if you are now in Germany for the European Championship, would you not want your son or daughter to run out with a player? That's what we did in 2006. There was 1,248 kids, whatever it is, 64 teams times 22. So 1,448, 1,248, 1,148, some of that kind of corner, in which significant part came out of Germany. And we had we had 40% of the relevant age group in Germany signing up to becoming one and raffle it off. Between 7 and 9, I think, was the age requirement from FIFA at the time. Similar to Formula One. You're bringing your clients to Formula One because they're interested in that world, but they're also interested in meeting other clients. Right? If you're an entrepreneur and you have a wealth manager, you want to sit down with somebody at that race and discuss business. And then you're interested in that racing world. UBS has one of the biggest art collections in the world. Art Basel, partner for 30 plus years. That authenticity of having a collection, being a part of it, that's what you're looking for when you think about sponsorship. Then yes, sponsorship has one thing to it that makes it even more attractive. If your brand is well known, it will get a lot more affordable awareness. Obviously not as much content related because it's a logo on a banner somewhere, but it will get you a lot more attention, a lot more awareness for
you're
money.
You're going for the number one spot. You're not looking at, okay, why don't we take the top 500 art fairs or top 100 art fairs? You say,
that's just if I was Rolex, they'd buy anything they can get, right? That's just a factor of how much money do you have.
Right.
I would buy everything.
If you have the budget.
If you got the budget.
Well, whilst you mentioned Rolex and obviously your work now in fashion, I wanted to talk to you about luxury because, there's always this debate happening around whether luxury ever changes and luxury marketing ever changes, or we are in a new modern era of luxury. So what do you think it takes today to build a luxury brand in the modern era?
That's a real big question, a real difficult question to answer. The world is a lot more short-attentioned than ever before. We also have more available than ever before. If you just think about the amount of sneakers you can buy today. I think it boils down to be, again, a very clear perspective of what's our unique selling proposition. Why are we different as an On shoe versus a Nike versus a Puma versus Adidas? And then consistently driving that into the marketplace. In branding in general, physical locations play a role. If you think about what many of the luxury brands do today in buying buildings, is because of the brand visibility that you get through that.
And what separates it from being luxury because you could have a very well executed brand that is prosumer or mass. What are the elements that make that feel luxury?
Often is how it is orchestrated, being put together, the quality it comes with, often the talking value of how difficult it is to get. Look, I grew up in a world when we started researching technology on your wrist at Intel, 2009, 10, that kind of corner. There was no really, yes, there was digital watches and there was some of them that be smarter, but it was not the environment we are in today. Most people did not want tech on their arm because it hadn't been clearly laid out why they should have one. And I think with the Apple Watch and some other brands shown up, it is now clear. And by the way, artificial intelligence, when people say, oh, it's all new. No, actually, that feature when you fall with an iPhone or fall with your iWatch, that it will say, it seems that you have had an accident. Do you want to call an emergency? That's AI. That is as live as AI gets. So it's been around for a while. It is not as front and center as it is maybe today. At the time when we researched those technology watches on your wrist, most people that couldn't afford a high-end watch would then buy a pre-owned.
Yeah.
The last couple of years made them more expensive than list price. So I think it's a combination of unique seller proposition, positioning, building your brand by authenticity to product related. I think it's more complicated today than ever before. we also have more in front of us than ever before. If you think, I would like to build out a luxury hotel chain, it's a bit difficult because there's kind of everything available already. So it's finding something more unique.
What I do want to close today's interview off is, the reason that I invited you on is I remember many years ago seeing a behind-the-scenes advert of, I think you had the world's largest piano to create the specific sound that was to end every single UBS advert. And I remember thinking, God, I want to work for that guy. That is the pinnacle of wealth management branding. And I think you're the greatest to ever do it in wealth management, and arguably one of the best marketers that we've ever had in any industry. So I'm keen to try and digest some advice from you for people listening to the show that are marketers, aspiring CMOs, active CMOs in financial services and outside of that. What do you think it will take for the next generation of CMOs to be successful? What is your advice to them?
So thank you for the roses before. I'm honored. The same it took for me, hard work. I remember I was lucky enough to be at the Sydney Olympics as a part of my function at McDonald's. We had signed on a great 400-meter runner from US who had retired as being a part of our spokesperson. And it's Carl Lewis. And we were standing one evening after a press conference and sort of looking into a crowd of people, and then I asked him, so what does it take? You won it so often, and you're up against, if you think about his career and many athletes' career, there's a great statistic in a moment from Federer, I hope I get it right. What does it take to know you can go out? And he would say, I get up an hour earlier than my competitors, I train longer, I go later to bed. I think it's the same for me, for any of us. We just work harder. Interestingly, Federer has won like 8, I'll get the numbers right, but in the right area. 85% of every tournament he's gone into, he's won. Tournament, game, probably. Of the ones he won, do you know with how many points he won it?
I have no idea.
54%, which means he just barely won, but he barely won. He won. Consistently. But is this, no, I played up against people that could easily have won that day, and I was just that 4% better. And that's what it takes. Hard work. Nothing else. Best people around you. Best agency partners. Best people around you. Try as hard as you can to be a role model. Offer people up I've never hired anybody for the job I hired them for. I always hired them for the next one. I'm not interested in hiring you for a job that is available. I'm interested in getting you and then get you onto your next job after that and you being successful. That's what I'm paid for. Paid for getting great people onto a team.
When you say great people, and I imagine you've hired many marketers over your time.
Yep.
What are you looking for in someone that's great?
Well, I think it's always the typical 3 or 4 or 5 things, right? It's great experience, great education, blah, blah, blah. Attitude. None of what I do cannot be taught overnight. There's no magic in what we do in most of the things, right? If you think about what humans are able to do, I'm not a open heart surgeon on babies where you really need to know what you're doing every time you're doing it. It's always attitude. And it's attitude because if you get the wrong attitude, it destroys the team spirit. And now you can have a bunch of great people and one bad apple, and it won't work as well as if they all click. Doesn't mean that they're not competitive. It's similar to football. We're right now in European Championships. But it's the teams that knows how to play well that will eventually win. And they might not be the best single 11 players in the world. They will be the 11 best together. That's what you're going for. Not best single 11 together. It's the 11 best together you're going for. That's your job.
Well, that's also good advice to the England team right now during the Euros.
They play tonight, right?
Yeah, exactly. They
Good
play
luck.
tonight. Yeah. Look, Johan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I think it's an inspirational message for everyone to raise the bar. And I think the work you've done has been, incredible throughout your career. So thank you for coming in.
Thank you.